everyone. Good afternoon. You all can hear me. I would like to welcome you all to this fantastic COP29 side event towards a youth inclusive climate, peace, and security agenda. My name is Benjamin Basmaji, UNDP, at the Regional Bureau for Arab States, and I'll be moderating today's panel. And we're thrilled to have you all join us to discuss this very important agenda. Today, we're building on the momentum of the COP Day on peace, relief, and recovery, including the discussion at the high level dialogue on global framework on children, youth, peace, and climate security. This panel will highlight examples from youth representatives, driving solutions in climate peace security, individuals like these panelists and many in the room who are here at the forefront of climate action and peace building. The event is organized in collaboration with our partners, the Cairo International Center for Conflict Resolution, Peacekeeping and Peacebuilding, CCCPA, the Folkabane Academy, FBA, and the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, SIPRI. Our conversation today is grounded in two essential resources. The recently launched UNDP paper, Bridging Generations, Pathways to a Youth Inclusive Climate, Peace and Security Agenda, which looks into a meaningful youth inclusion engagement and empowerment within UNDP's existing CPS initiatives. I actually, from a personal perspective, enjoyed working with this and have been working from the Arab States perspective in Jordan, where we're supporting youth on climate security by enhancing and empowering them to come up with innovative solutions that brings multiple benefits towards human security and climate action too. The other key product that we're building on is the one developed by FBA, UNDP, and SIPRI, and is a guidance note, Beyond Vulnerability, a guidance note on youth, climate, peace, and security, and highlights youth-led efforts to address climate-related security risks and provides actionable steps towards advancing a unified agenda. Lastly, before handing it over to our fantastic opening remark, we also have a youth iteration of our Climate Peace Security Expert Academy that took place just a month ago. This was our largest iteration to date and brought together 46 youth representatives from 22 countries exchanging knowledge on climate policies and finance for peace. Yesterday, we launched a network. Several of our speakers and participants today are alumni of the Academy and will share their experiences of how they're applying this knowledge. So I'll hand over to our fantastic speaker, Joyce Mendes, the UN Secretary General Youth Advisor on Climate Change, who will provide opening remarks and has a background in youth-led environmental initiatives across Latin America and Caribbean and the world, and her continued advocacy for young people's role in climate action makes her the leading voice in this space today. So I'll hand over to Joyce.
Aisha Pa or buen dia, bon dia. How are you doing? Good day or good afternoon already. I hope you're finding COP, like it's been intense. It feels like we have been for longer than just a week. I hope you have enough energy for the following days. And I also want to thank the organizers for creating this space. Also for you to be here because it's very important in this moment, right? We have a momentum. And especially I think for Latin America, people are mentioning COP30, COP30, but we're not going to get to COP30 without, inclusive NDCs. And I think that we have been with meetings with several ministries, and they have mentioned the world and actually the nexus of youth, peace, and security several times. I think that NDCs also, they are going to provide a reflection of their own country's capabilities regarding this nexus and regarding youth, peace, and security at the same time. I think that at the same time, it is very fundamental to have practical knowledge, guidance, especially how, I mean, I see this guide for policymakers, right? We were even handing this, guide as well to Ministra Susana Mohammed yesterday in a meeting, and she was like, "Oh, thank you. We need concrete information as well, practices on how we can be even more inclusive in this process of NDCs regarding this nexus, but also for us, when I was contacted by Maria as well, in the full process, you know, at the beginning I was like, it's very interesting because we see a lot of documents, articles, information, but we don't see sometimes very, specific showcasing youth realities. And especially it's been a process which is an intergenerational, like project. And last but not least, I don't want to talk a lot, I just get excited, is that myself, I was born in Colombia and I come from a climate migrant family. So we come from the north of the country where there is a lot of coal production. But it's an area that has a lot of impacts on climate. So my family decided to migrate. But as a migrant, sometimes you think, okay, I'm going to a safest country, and I feel better. And then we went to Brazil, the border with Brazil, Paraguay, and Argentina, and climate change, water scarcity is a big issue. And then as a migrant, I understand as well that our work and that our perspectives on youth and peace and security need to be taken into account, because there is no borders for climate change. And there should not be borders as well for cooperation in terms of youth, peace, and security. Muito obrigado, muchas gracias, and enjoy this amazing session. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Joyce, for highlighting the importance of multilateral collaboration and making sure that climate change is at the forefront, and highlighting the role of youth. Thank you, Joyce. So we'll move on to the panelists, and I'm privileged to be here with the exceptional lineup, to ask concrete examples and hear from you all about how you're working with climate action. First, we have Marilyn Moira Simmons. Thank you so much for being here. Um, she is the Ocean Engagement Lead with the Pacific Island Forum States, a climate security advocate from Tuvalu, a COP28 International Climate Delegate, and a member of Yongo. Moira also contributed to the guidance note that we just highlighted. Um, and I have a question for you, Moira. What are the most pressing climate related security risks that young people face in the Pacific Islands? And how are you working on solutions and initiatives to address these challenges? I'll hand over the mic.
Testing. Start fine. Thank you very much, moderator, and thank you to our keynote speaker for that very inspiring opening. I think, as the only Pacific person here in the pavilion, it gives me a lot of privilege, and I hope that I do justice for the voices within the 20 or so ocean states who are all here lobbying, be at the IOSIS or least developed countries. Um, but I hope that I do justice for the voices given the security issues that we face in the Pacific. As you may all know, when Ferdinand Magellan named the Pacific, or when he came to the Pacific, he named the Pacific Ocean because he found it very peaceful. And within our ocean and the people that we have, we are ingrained within our cultural ties. For us, our values, our identity, the traditional knowledge we have speaks volumes of who we are and how we accord and approach issues in the Pacific. Since 1992 and the Rio Declaration, and since 1995, since COP first started, over and over and over again, we have talked about climate change. And not so long ago, we have had lobbies at the UN and how a lot of these Pacific countries talk about existential threats and how for us it is a matter of our survival. I'm from Tuvalu. It's the fourth smallest country in the world. When I walked in this morning, or this afternoon, a colleague of mine asked me, "Tell me about Tuvalu." And when I told him that there was only 10,000 people from Tuvalu, he didn't believe me. Because he came from a country that was 45 million. But that being said, we are at the forefront of climate change. Our ancestors had voyaged from Southeast Asia decades and decades ago to settle in the Pacific. Like our keynote speaker spoke about her being a migrant or a climate migrant, us in the Pacific, whenever it comes to our challenges, one thing is for sure, we fall back on our families, we fall back on our communities. And for us, we don't have industries. I mean, most of the most of the countries in the Pacific, apart from Australia and New Zealand, they don't have industries. They do not contribute, or maybe a very minuscule amount of greenhouse gas emissions. I'm sure you've heard that already in so many other forums. But when we talk about security or climate security in the Pacific, I think for us, it's a matter of protecting our land, our ocean, and our people. Our land, we sit 2 to 3 meters above sea level. We don't have the funding to reclaim our land. When we talk about our ocean, we know that our ocean is the blue lung. It is what that will protect us. It is the solution to climate change in the long run. But we need to protect the ocean. The ITLAW's advisory opinion that was co-chaired by um, Antigua and Barbuda and Tuvalu actually highlighted how within the UNCLAWS there is an obligation for states when it comes to marine pollution. Now, for us in Tuvalu, and for us as I speak here, not as just a Tuvaluan, but a Pacific person, I feel that at the end of the day, it's a matter of ensuring that there is enough ocean finance funding to protect our ocean, keep it resilient and healthy for our Pacific people, because that's where the bulk of our revenue comes from. Nearly 80% of our Pacific people depend on the tuna industry, and we know with El Nino, our tuna is migrating. And when these stocks migrate, what happens? It affects our livelihoods directly. Then comes our people. I spoke about the land and I spoke about the ocean. But when you talk about the people, let me say this. In the Pacific, I do understand that from the 193 or so states within the UN, there is a very small representation of Pacific people. Now, how will you be able to get the science assessments from the Pacific? How will you be able to know what happens firsthand in the Pacific if within the multilateral organizations that support the people do not have these people present? Not only are they underrepresented, they are not represented. So for me, if we talk about climate security, I think this is the first place we can look at approaches to, to suggest ways that can help our people. I'll stop there for now.
Thank you so much, Moira. I could listen on and on and on. Thank you so much. I don't even know how to summarize that, but land, ocean, and also people and representation. Um, your remarks are very well noted, and thank you so much for sharing that with us. I think that's really, really important on how we can work with climate security, particularly with small island states in the Pacific as well. Thank you. We'll move on to our next speaker, Hamza, um, who is the director of Somalia Youth Hub under the Ministry of Youth and Sports in Somalia. Hamza organized Somalia's first Elkoi, so congrats on that, and is key to the work of Somalia's development on the YPS NAP, and is an alumni of the CPS Experts Academy and Network. So Hamza, as an alumni to the CPS Expert Academy, how has your experience there influenced your work in Somalia's Youth Peace and Security National Action Plan? And how are you incorporating climate security insights into your work?
I think I'm audible. Thank you so much for the wonderful question, and I'll thank the keynote speaker for actually inspiring us and starting an aspiring note, and also getting to know more on the Pacific Islands and what is there. And I think such COPs, it might be hectic venues, but at the end of the day, we as youth can at least understand and teach each other about our countries and and what we do in our different capacities. And of course, CPS Expert Academy was an amazing tool for me and for Somalia as a whole. And just because I'm saying this is we just launched our consultations this month, and we had the academy last month. So it taught us a lot of how we can integrate our climate securities into our youth and peace and security consultation that we're doing currently. And climate security in Somalia, I mean, Somalis, we are not very big when it comes to the methodologies. The climate is a very old thing in Somalia, but people are just realizing now because of the momentum it has currently. And the biggest problem when it comes to climate security in Somalia is the feeding grounds. A lot of people are pastoralistics, and they do fight for the grounds that they want the animals to be fed on. And this actually creates a very a dynamic situation when it comes to security in Somalia. But this security was used to be called national security. It was under the national security of the office of the president. But again, in September, I think if Catherine Wong recalls, UNDP has organized the national security of office of prime minister with UNDP organized the climate security conference in Somalia, which actually tapped on all these security issues that we're having. And the main problem of these security insecurities in the country is caused by climate. So how do we now engage the police forces? How do we educate the militaries to know about climate? Because it's very hard to tell a policeman or a military about what is causing these problems. What is the root cause of these problems? And I think now UADP is actually starting with the National Security Office of the President on educating these police forces and militaries on climate issues so they know the roots of the causes. And another point that I want to retaliate is the YPS that now we are doing consultations with. And we actually done in four federal member states. And actually, these four federal member states have one thing in common. It's the most affected federal member state when it comes to droughts and floods. And we use this approach, people approach PRFM, and we don't ask them questions directly, but we rather let the youth tell us what is their problems. And actually, 90% of the time, when they're telling us what is the youth and security problems they're facing in their region, climate comes as one of the main points. So this actually shows you that it's a very important issue. And before I close, I want to touch on finances. Finances is very, very important when it comes to climate. Countries like Somalia, we don't contribute, I mean, similar to Tuvalu, we don't contribute much to the climate, but we get affected most by climate change. And how do we get this through these finances where the multilateral system of the finances are very hard for such an African country to get to? How do we now engage the UN agencies and other financial agencies in making sure that these processes are made simpler for countries like Somalia and in East Africa? And also, I keep repeating this if I get the chance to speak everywhere, which is we need our own private sectors to wake up. I know we had enough with we can't thank enough UN agencies and international organizations on the funds they're giving us. That's actually very generous. Thank you so much. But we need our private sectors actually to wake up and actually to contribute more. And that's where I will end it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Hamza. That's really, really inspiring. And thank you for highlighting the importance of capacity building and integrated solutions, and especially on how climate finance can also contribute to the human security and especially for youth. Thank you so much, Hamza. And wonderful hearing about your experiences too. Thank you. We'll move on to our third panelist, Hassan, co-founder and executive director of Uganda's Muslim Youth Development Forum, and a member of the Kofi Annan Foundation's Extremely Together initiatives. Hassan's experience includes empowering youth and religious leaders in peace building, conflict prevention, and the intersection between climate action and peace. So, Hassan, how has your work with the Uganda Muslim Youth Development Forum led to solutions at the intersection of climate action and peace building, particularly in empowering young people? and religious leaders? And can you share an example of an initiative that addresses this climate youth related security challenges?
Thank you so much. Yeah, again, my name is Hassan Dugwa from Uganda, but I also represent the Kofi Annan Foundation. It's an Extremely Together initiative, which is a network of leaders who are contributing to the youth peace and security agenda. The network is spread out in various countries, and yeah, going to your questions, I mean, I've been attending um, conversations during this COP, and it's evident that there's increased recognition and appreciation of the nexus between climate change and conflict, which hasn't been the case so many years ago. And this is, of course, a positive for the work that we all do. Um, Again, like so many people have said, it's evident that climate change exacerbates conflict in a way that we can't imagine, and also it's evident that the countries that contribute minimally to emissions are actually affected the most, and these are also countries that are engulfed in kind of conflicts and wars. But also, it's evident that most of a vast majority of the populations of these countries we are speaking about are young people. And these are young people who are already impoverished, young people already unemployed, young people who are limited in participation, participating in key decision making and policy processes. Um, with that background, the Kofi Annan Foundation and Extremely Together and the CIPRI and other partners, Elman Peace from Somalia, and my organization and others in Burkina Faso and Niger, we set out to first understand young people's perspectives and experiences at the intersection between climate change and conflict on peace and security. And we coined this study um, in 6 countries. That is in Burkina Faso, in Somalia, in Niger, in Uganda, Pakistan, and the Philippines. And I would like to share some of the few findings that we came up with, um, basing on the consultation that we made, because we consulted over 1,150 young people in these countries. And again, we focused on areas that are hard to reach, areas such as Afgoye in Somalia, Renzori region in Uganda, um, Marb in Philippines, and the town of Todari in Burkina Faso. So first, it was evident that um, the interconnected vulnerabilities that young people face. Young people are in agriculture, young people are in fisheries, young people are in tourism, are in forestry, and these are all sectors that are impacted by climate change. So, with disasters, floods, and droughts, young people have been greatly affected. And it was evident that for example, Burkina Faso, um, young farmers are fed up of planting, you know, growing crops because the yields are too low. Um, we've also, of course, you've spoken about the pastoral communities and the agriculture communities conflicts. Those are very evident in Uganda, in Burkina Faso, in Niger, and we've seen um, I mean, cattle dying, and pastoralists left with no option but to engage in conflicts. And also, um, with that there's a gendered impact to this as well. Women, especially young women, are most affected by the in this intersection of climate and conflict. They're exposed to sexual and gender-based violence. They are exposed to all sorts of insecurities, economic insecurity, and of course, the in addition to their caregiving roles, it becomes difficult. Um, Also, we've seen that mobility, mobility as migration, there's been an exodus of young people moving from rural areas to urban areas, where young people are exploited on this journey. They are faced with human trafficking, and this hasn't left them the same. Um, Young people have been exposed to armed groups as well in terms of recruitment because, I mean, alternative forms of livelihoods are all perished. So it's I'll sum up the findings in that way, but it's a situation that calls for urgent approaches, and for us as the Uganda Muslim Forum, the Extremists Together, and other partners, CIPRI, we think that it is important for us to rethink decision making and accountability mechanisms. Young people need to be more involved. We want to see youth um, advisory councils created permanently that inform policy decisions at all levels, at the multinational level, but also at the local and regional levels. We are saying it's not just young people do not want to be a paragraph in the document. They don't want to have that group photo with the policymakers that we engage them. They don't want to be um, that statistic in that document. They want actual engagement. So I'll stop here for now. Thank you.
Hassan, thank you so much for sharing that insight and for sharing the findings of your research, and especially highlighting the role that youth should have, considering that they're seeing they're witnessing all this that you highlighted, both in the agriculture sector, but also like leading to armed conflicts and extreme violence. Thank you so much, Hassan. Once again, thank you. Um, Moving on, last but not least, we have Victoria Ball. Thank you so much for being here. Victoria is the co-founder of Rosvi, fantastic, and Youth for Climate awardee and climate justice activist from Ukraine. Victoria works on food and energy system transition, building civil society capacity to adapt to the threats of human well-being and security. Victoria, thank you so much
Thank
again
you.
for being here. Um, as a Youth for Climate awardee from Ukraine, how have you observed the environmental impacts of conflict intersecting with climate security risks, especially for young people? And how are you working with civil society through initiatives like the ROSVI to help communities adapt to these threats and build resilience aimed at ongoing challenges?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm really honored to be here and to speak to some extent on behalf of Ukrainian youth. Sorry if I'm sometimes my voice is breaking up today, but I'll try my best. To start with, I just want to say thank you to everyone who has spoken on the panel already before me, because as I've reflected on your experiences, I'm seeing how much um, while we come from such different contexts, completely different continents, our experiences intersect to quite a surprising degree. And perhaps I will touch upon how a little bit later. But um, just to begin with, sort of to share my own experience, I am a young Ukrainian climate activist. I started in the Fridays for Future movement of Ukraine, and I went on to also be a big part of the global movement, because for a country like Ukraine, where the climate movement isn't something huge as in, let's say, Western European countries, international support has been everything. And it has been especially so since the full-scale invasion, the full-scale war started in Ukraine because of Russian occupation in 2022. But first, let's acknowledge that Ukraine has been suffering from the environmental impacts of war for the last, in fact, 10 years. It hasn't been just the nearly three that perhaps the global community has awoken to recently. And I when I'm noticing these the impact of the war, the first thing you notice is perhaps not the environmental impacts straight away, but it's the impact on human security in terms of mental health. At the moment, my hometowns are being bombed every single day. People are not able to sleep for most days because during the night is when we get air raid attacks. Air raid sirens go on for hours, and it has a real mental toll. We and the the issue is this takes away so much capacity from young people. It means that they don't have the resources to engage daily in the same way as their counterparts in countries that have relative peace, with education, with work. It means that their livelihoods are constantly disrupted. There are people who are privileged enough to have, maybe jobs where they don't have to stay in one place, and let's say they can work from home when they have access to electricity. But at the same time, the war has meant that our energy facilities have been one of the primary targets of the Russian military, and in civilian areas, not just military objects. All the time, it's civilian infrastructure and housing being targeted, especially in the east and south of the country, but really all over every region has been affected to some extent, and that has posed a huge, existential threat because people aren't able to, when we are cut off from energy and electricity, we are not able to access basic needs like hot water. We are not able to sometimes connect to our loved ones. It means that we don't know what's at stake, and there is a huge uncertainty day to day, which means also that for a lot of environmental activists, they have had to take a step back from their environmental work and actually focus on these existential threats that are presented immediately. They are joining the war effort. They are joining, the voluntary humanitarian aid effort. And you may think a lot of people at the beginning, especially, lost hope in the international community because we felt that no amount of aid was going to take us back to normal life, and we wouldn't be able to fight for climate action anymore. But as the war progressed, we have realized that actually the solutions for resilience and human security throughout war have always been there and present throughout our work, as as the climate movement. It's green solutions. It's especially renewable energy, because we, for example, when we talk about the primary energy facilities being targeted, it's the coal power plants. Most of them have been completely obliterated. It's the gas infrastructure, the oil infrastructure that then poisons the land, and it will take decades to clear this up. Even with the reparations that we're demanding from the aggressor, it will take years. But when we look at, for example, wind and solar, it is times and times cheaper um, to clear the debris. It's times and times cheaper to reinstall a solar panel than to rebuild, a coal power station or I don't know an oil well. And actually, quite surprisingly, our defenders, our brothers and sisters on the front line, they are using solar power to ensure that they are safe and warm, even in those horrendous conditions. Because even if a solar panel is destroyed, they can replace it within a single day. And this has not just been a solution on the front lines, it's been a solution in communities. Even UNDP, which is part of organizing this panel today, has been involved in helping local communities install solar power plants for critical infrastructure like hospitals, like water pumps, like um, transport hubs, which means that we, the energy grid becomes decentralized, and we are able to not rely on this both targeted and, let's remember, really destructive and harmful industry that is fossil fuels. And that's why when we call for a fossil fuel phase out, we say that we need a fossil phase out for peace, because um, like my initiative Rosvi, we are advocating for a just green recovery. And for us, a just green recovery, it means just peace. Because as long as we stay coupled to the fossil fuel industry, we will stay dependent on the powers that are colonizing us, especially, and so will the rest of Europe, and so will our neighbors in the Caucasus and Central Asia. So in this region where COP is being held right now. So it's really important that we remember that the solutions um, that we need are already there. They are saving money. They are providing people with, basic utilities like water, like heating. They are there to ensure health, whereas the fossil fuel industry is harmful not just for communities, but also the workers in these industries. In the fossil fuel industry, the fatality rate is 7 times higher than average across all other industries, and that's crazy. Like, people don't recognize the impact on health. So, to kind of summarize, in Ukraine, we are seeing that we can find hope in resilience, and we can find resilience in green solutions like renewable energy, like sustainable practices in other sectors like agriculture, to ensure human security. But they must, of course, be funded, because these solutions are saving money, but again, we need private sector engagement to a much greater scale. We need to build these cross-border partnerships to ensure that also our recovery expertise is passed on, and that our recovery becomes a just green recovery for every community, no matter the threats we are facing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Victoria. Thank you, thank you. Thank you for highlighting that the green transition is just beyond mitigating greenhouse gas emissions and is also contributing to human security, as you highlighted, especially when there is an active war. So thank you so much, Victoria. I'll open very quickly if there's any burning questions to the panelists. Um, if not, we'll move on to the closing speaker. We have one question over there.
Yes, I would just like to thank all of the panelists for their very important interventions. Um, just two questions. The first one is in the work that all of you do tied to the thematic area of focus for this event, which focuses on youth inclusive climate peace and security agenda. Um, what's your perspective of the importance of technology, and how can technology play a significant role in all of this? The next part of it is that from the experience for my country in Africa, Liberia particularly, the issues of public education and awareness is quite vital um, to be able to inculcate the kind of um, issues around youth inclusion related to climate change, peace, and security. How have you been able to infuse public education and awareness in the minds of young people in your respective countries? Probably because of time, one or two persons can be able to respond to that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the question. Do we have a volunteer? Fantastic.
Yeah, so thank you for the question, and I think I'll give a more of a specific sort of context. I think when you talk about digital transformation, we live in the era of AI. So for us in the Pacific, I believe that this is an era that a lot of children and youth and even adults within the workspace are still trying to accustom themselves to. So my advice would be the way we are heading, it's so important that we have proper safeguards for the use of AI. And this is to do with everything from curricula to do with our legislations. It is so important that our people are protected. Recently, I was in San Francisco and we used something called a Waymo, which is this self driven cab, this taxi. And I realized that it had, as much as it is very efficient, it is expensive compared to the usual taxis, and it held up traffic, which is very different from how our usual human taxi drivers would maneuver. Now, the reason I bring this up is at the end of the day, we must value our social interactions, and that is something that we can't teach AI. So when we are creating these policies and we are fusing this into our curricula, it is so important that we understand what we are doing, what we are inputting, and who is in the driver's seat. Because at the end of the day, it is us who should be controlling the AI and not the other way around, especially when it comes to technology. On the second thing, you talked about capacity building, if I may. In my work within the Pacific Island Forum Secretariat, I work as the Ocean Engagement Officer at for the Office of the Pacific Oceans Commissioner. And we look at ocean literacy, where our job is to build the capacity of our young people and teach them why it's important to protect your ocean. At the end of the day, it may be your lifeblood, like a lot of people may have said, but more than that, it is where we come from. And in order for us to build a better tomorrow, we should protect what we have today, which includes building sustainable livelihoods using our homes and understanding the practices that have been ingrained in us for generations. So the traditional knowledge that we have is invaluable. And it's important that when we build these capacity building programs, that they are intertwined and they are weaved and crafted into the science that we want to have these reports produce. Thank you.
I think that's very well answered. I don't know if I can top her answer, but in Somalia, when it comes to technology, it's I think most of the youth are very widely connected to the world. And as you know, Somalia population, most of our population actually live outside the country than within the country. So that connection we have with technology is very important. When it comes to connectivity within the government, I think my colleague here is from the Ministry of Youth also here can be a testimony. We had the National Youth Policy that we were doing in 2023. And while the ministry was doing the policy, there was certain areas, because of political issues or because of security issues, we couldn't go. Or there was not physical consultations to be done. But we used technology to get the voices and the insights of the knowledge of the youth who are in particularly in those areas that we did not go because of those issues. And it actually helped us now to understand more on, it actually saves us more on resources, and it actually makes it easier for us to maneuver when we're having technologies, when we're doing our work as consultations, and when we're doing policies. And in terms of capacity building and awareness, I think that's very, very important. And for Somalia, when it comes to technology and climate, the Ministry of Environment is actually introducing with the Ministry of Education a curriculum, whereas a green curriculum in Somalia, even though the current curriculum has some elements on climate change and environment, but it needs to be clear in a wider space. And the Ministry of Youth and Sports actually has and put this in the document of the National Youth Policy as one of the key thematical pillars of our policy is environment, and which I think now we are doing much more better, since we already have a ministry that was Somalia didn't have a ministry of environment for the last we had only for the last 2 years, so which actually shows you the importance of the climate is for now for us. Thank you so much.
Yeah, just to add on what my colleagues have said, I think technology is quite important. However, it needs to be funded, especially we're talking about capacity building. But young people, one of the recommendations coming out is that young people need to be, their projects need to be financed, and that trust is not there that young people will, use the funds, well. But also, we know that in some countries, like where I come from, yes, young people are connected, but how are they using this technology? How are they using the social media? They're not using it for things for innovations like creating awareness on climate and peace related issues. They're using it for gossiping and other other issues. So, but also we come from repressive governments where um, technology sometimes is for example, social media is banned in some countries. For example, Facebook in my country is banned, so young people cannot use it. So it becomes difficult in some contexts, whereas in some others it moves faster. But again, it's important that we fund young people's projects and innovations. Thank you.
Could I really, really shortly? Yeah. I won't add so much on technology, but more on youth capacity building, because as part of the support that I'm receiving as part of the Youth for Climate program, an award is to create a media resource for young people who are interested in just transition and green recovery. It's a completely new topic in Ukraine. It's like the concept of a green recovery is very little known. And very often when there are resources that are linked to the just transition, is to do with energy or environment, it's kind of considered as just in general not very popular because they don't understand the intersectional issues that it affects, like their everyday lives, the injustices that people face, especially younger people and especially women and people of other genders. What we want to do is really build the skills of these kind of intersectoral connections and the knowledge around them, and to follow up on what we're doing with the media resource, which will start off as a podcast, but then kind of develop into a series of different media resources. For education, we hope to interact with youth councils under local administrations. So to create these capacity building workshops where they can look at what areas of their communities are being most impacted by the war, with local experts in climate and environment, and the like intersecting social issues, so that they then can develop the relevant policy demands with this support, and demand a just green recovery in their own communities from their own local governments. And yeah, that's something that we're still looking for support for, but I think yeah, it's a project that's definitely giving our small kind of community a lot of hope. Thank you.
Thank you all so very much. Thank you for great reflections and thank you for the question as well. So, to close, I like to invite Yara, the Youth Peace and Climate Security Program Officer from Triple CPA, to provide her reflections on today's discussion. And just to highlight, the Triple CPA has been a very, very important partner in the Climate Peace and Security Experts Academy. So, thank you so much for being here, and the floor is yours.
I'm not as tall as Benjamin, but all right. Thank you very much, and it gives me a great pleasure to give the closing remarks on this side event. And before giving the closing remarks, I'd like to give a very short note regarding where I come from, Cairo International Center for Conflict Resolution, Peacekeeping and Peace Building, Triple CPA, and the partnership with UNDP, and then some takeaways as to conclude my words. So, actually, this is a continuity of Triple CPA's partnership with UNDP. Catherine is here, and I really appreciate all the efforts on the youth iteration on Climate Peace and Security Academy, which took place in Nairobi a couple of months ago, a successful iteration from my own point of view, and seizing actually this moment that we are at COP29, and the effort has been done and started since COP27 in Egypt. I'm Egyptian, where I come from. So the COP27 presidency put forward an initiative called Climate Responses for Sustaining Peace, known as CRISP. And this initiative, Triple CPA, is the secretariat, and along with the UNDP, doing joint activities in regards to capacity building, state building, and training. It also ensures African priorities and voices are amplified at the top of the global agenda. It has four main pillars. The first one is on strengthening climate adaptation and peace building nexus. Another on strengthening climate resilient food security systems. And the third on doable solutions for climate displacement. And the last, scaling up climate finance. And we cannot ignore the integrating efforts of women and youth into the CRISP initiative. And that said, I'd like to also add that building capacities is a key. It's a key function role that Triple CPA is doing, and also finding like ensuring enhancing national ownership and context specificity within the initiative is also another key to foster resilience in communities and etc. So during the academy, I'd like to reflect on the session that we were leading on the interlinkages between youth peace and security and climate peace and security agendas, and we figured out a couple of points that I'd like to share with everybody, especially that you weren't there during the academy. First of all, data. There is a missing data, the data gap when we talk about number of youth, young migrants, young peace builders, climate champions, youth in different situations. There is lack of data. The second thing, we'd like to ensure more youth responsive policies, not only inclusive and not only sensitive, but more responsive into climate peace and security. Another thing, which is the conflict prevention and mediation, is also a key, and it became fundamental in the new agenda for peace, and in all the narratives, even at the regional level, at the national level. And I'm glad to say that Triple CPA became part. And myself became part of the first cohort of the African Union African Youth Network on conflict prevention and mediation, and we look forward that also at the regional level that we have a more climate peace and security angle into this network. So building on takeaways from this wonderful, and I'm happy to be meeting today with my brothers and sisters from all over the world. I'd like to tell you that it's wonderful to hear, especially from the Pacific Islands, and this takes me back to when I was in Vanuatu and in Togo. The Pacific Islands are wonderful places, but still facing a lot of climate issues
So let's go for number one, which is amplifying youth voices and needs, especially issues that are facing youth and regions that are at the forefront of climate change and also affected by displacement, migration, food insecurities, water insecurities. This is number one as a takeaway from this session, side event. Number two, ensuring financing. I think financing has been mentioned in all aspects, not only climate adaptation and resilience, but also when it comes to agriculture and food insecurity. And number three, enhance a people approach when tackling all issues around climate change and scaling up partnerships, particularly at the national level when it comes to private sector, not only the international organizations. And number three, capacity building is a key, as we said. Also, the interlinkages of climate peace and security with other agendas, not only youth peace and security, but when it comes to as well peace building frameworks, displacement, food security, conflict and violence. So it's important to find out these interlinkages and solutions and guide enhanced guidelines to have solutions in this regard. And also youth advisory councils. I think they increased more than before when we see young negotiators here during COP29 being part of the conversation. Also, a green transition, as mentioned by my sister from Ukraine, and technology could be a double-edged weapon. So it's important to make sure to use it as a solution for the implications of climate change. So actually, to close, we look forward to scale up altogether solutions and partnerships for everybody here in the room and more efforts in regards specifically the gaps featured between the youth peace and security, climate peace and security agendas. And one last thing to say, climate peace and security relies on the potential of youth. There is no solution without youth nowadays, the future leaders. And please clap for yourselves all. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Yara. That was fantastic. Really appreciate it. And thank you to all the speakers and the audience as well for all being here. I wish we could stay here a whole day, but we can't. It was really interesting listening to you all. I'd like to once again thank all the partners, FBA, CIPRI, Triple CPA, and our colleagues for coming here and for listening. Thank you all and see you all soon.
And my sister.
Hey guys, I'm so proud of you guys.
Do you want to also? Yeah.
I
I know. Guys, let's take a picture.